found it through friends. So I moved to Sweden because a friend recommended me for a job. And that same friend bought an apartment via EGENBOSTAD, and that's why we contacted Olga as well to help us with our apartment purchase.
Yeah, so we didn't have 15% down payment, which every bank requires before purchasing a house, right? So we then engaged to find out, how do we get that 15%? Can we subsidize a certain percentage? Where do we get the shortfall from? And with that, we were instructed we can get it with personal loans, and the minimum amount we needed to pay in was not the 15%. We just needed at least 5%. Anything above that is perfectly fine, and that the shortfall, everything was handled for us via the bank, just by giving power of attorney away. So we didn't have to do anything ourselves. Olga and her amazing service did the rest for us.
I think what helped a lot as well is that we don't know the areas. So when we started looking, because we looked for a while on Hemnet before we contacted EGENBOSTAD. So we had an idea of like where we could live, but we had no idea about what our budget would be. And we weren't sure about the areas either, because we haven't been in Sweden that long. So we don't know where are the nice places to live and where are places best to avoid. We don't know anything. We also, the whole purchasing process is completely foreign to us. Where we come from, there's no bidding process. It's first come, first serve. So first person that makes an offer is generally accepted, and that's how it generally goes. And that's not how it works in Sweden at all. So having the extra help to point us to certain areas that we might not have originally considered was super helpful. And then as well as some guidance through the process, because sometimes you have to bid, and then like we lost quite a few bids. It's very nerve-wracking. Yeah. And sometimes you don't have to bid. So it was difficult. I think it would be very difficult to figure that out by ourselves. I think we would have failed a lot more times if we had been trying to do that by ourselves. I would say that the extra help with knowing exactly where we should stop bidding is very helpful as well. Because with the current economy and the way things are going at the moment, paying more for something than it's worth is even more detrimental than it would be in a stable market. So
especially with all the mortgage increases.
Yeah. And especially if you plan to resell, if you want to resell in a bit of a deflated market, you're going to really struggle to make back the money. So it was invaluable to have the valuation before we even start bidding. So how great the service worked so well that we would say we would go for viewings, and then we would say we'd be interested in a place, and we would get a valuation before we even start looking at bidding or making an offer to the agent. So we would know what would be a reasonable amount to go up to for a specific property, and we could set our expectations as well. Especially for newcomers, for anybody new in Sweden, because the Swedish property market is so unique, and there is definitely a housing crisis in Stockholm. Everybody knows this. Having the extra help and somebody in your corner helps a lot. Also the language barrier, because everybody tells us before we come here, oh, you don't have to know Swedish to be able to fit into the society. This is not entirely true. All the documentation and all official documentation is always in Swedish. So if you have somebody around to help you understand what it is that you're signing, it's super helpful. For example, when we actually bought our apartment, Olga at EGENBOSTAD actually walked us through the contract in English so that we could understand exactly what it is that we would be signing. So when we walked into the realtor's office, we knew exactly what was going on in the document, and we could ask any questions that we had them prepared. And that's very helpful. So I would say from that perspective, definitely the administrative tasks at the bank, most certainly, because even knowing about the 15% is something that people tell us when we say, okay, because every when you move to Sweden, everybody tells you you shouldn't buy instead of renting because it's cheaper. And then when you look into it, you realize, okay, I need a 15% down payment, but that's not necessarily true. And then when you speak to other Swedes about it, they say, yeah, but you can just apply to this, or you can go and talk to expat. But the problem is we don't always qualify for those services because we are expats. So having somebody in your corner to tell you exactly where you can get the extra help and where you can point you in the right directions and take care of all of the admin for you is invaluable. So I think it's definitely necessary.